Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are diving into AI in medicine.
Thanks for having me back. There's just so much to cover today.
There really is. Imagine going to the hospital because you're having trouble breathing, right?
Right.
And the machine, that little plastic clip they clamp onto your finger,
Hmm.
it tells the doctor you are perfectly fine.
Yeah, it says your oxygen is great.
Exactly. But it's totally wrong, all because the computer inside it wasn't trained to read light passing through your specific skin color.
Which sounds completely made up.
It sounds like a bad science fiction movie, but that isn't some dystopian novel. That is a real thing that actually happened.
It absolutely happened. And it's exactly why this topic is so critical right now.
So today, we are exploring this ultimate double-edged sword. We're looking at how computers and machines are basically learning to read the human body.
And it is a massive, a truly fundamental shift. Because for as long as medicine has existed, we have essentially been treating a phantom.
A phantom? What do you mean?
We have been treating the average human. But, you are not average.
Well, I like to think I'm a little above average.
Right, obviously. But biologically speaking, nobody is perfectly average. Every single body is different.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But we haven't had the tools to deal with that until right now. We finally have the computer power to look at your specific, unique biological blueprint and actually tailor the medicine to you.
Instead of just crossing our fingers and hoping you fit the standard mold.
Exactly. We're finally moving away from the guesswork.
And I want to set the stage for you, the listener, because the sheer volume of information we are pulling from today is just staggering.
It really is. The research is moving incredibly fast.
We are looking at a landmark 2025 summit report from the top medical journals. Plus, we're digging into a massive year-in-review analysis.
Yeah, that review combed through nearly 50,000 medical studies, just published recently.
50,000. That is wild. And on top of that, we have some incredible updates from the top technology labs that are already putting these systems into real human trials.
Right. And if there's one overarching theme across all these different sources, it's this fundamental transition in how doctors use computers.
Yeah, let's talk about that transition, because I think most of us just picture a computer in a doctor's office as a very expensive notepad.
That's exactly what it was.
Huh.
For a long time, computers in a clinic were just digital filing cabinets. They just stored text.
They just sat in the corner.
Right. But now, the technology is stepping out of that filing cabinet. It's becoming an active, problem-solving teammate in the actual clinic.
Okay, so to really understand how wild this is, we need to understand how we got here. Because if we are going to talk about artificial intelligence completely rewriting the rules of healthcare, we kind of have to look at the old rule book.
And the old rule book is built on a pretty flawed foundation.
Which goes back to that phantom you mentioned, the average patient.
Exactly. Think about how clinical drug trials have worked for decades. You take maybe a few thousand people, you give them a new pill, and you look at the overall results.
So just the big picture.
Right. If the drug helps the majority of the people and the side effects are acceptable for the majority of the people, it gets approved.
So the dosing instructions that get printed on the side of the bottle?
Those are calculated for the exact mathematical middle of that test group.
Okay. I like to think of this using a clothing store analogy because it really highlights how silly this is.
Go for it.
Imagine a company wants to make a brand new shirt. They measure 1,000 people, they average out all the heights and the shoulder widths, and they determine that the mathematically average human wears a size medium.
Okay, makes sense so far.
So they open a store that exclusively sells medium-sized shirts. Just mediums, nothing else.
That captures the problem perfectly, because if you happen to be a size medium, that store is fantastic.
Right, you walk in, you buy the shirt, and it fits you perfectly.
But if you are a size small, you are completely swimming in all this excess fabric.
And if you are an extra large, you are literally tearing the seams just trying to force the shirt onto your body.
Right. But in medicine, tearing the seams doesn't just mean you look silly in a shirt.
It means the drug doesn't cure your illness. Or worse.
Much worse. It gives you a severe, life-threatening reaction. And our sources highlight a very common, very high-stakes example of this.
Blood thinners, right?
Yes, standard blood thinners. Millions of people take these globally to prevent heart attacks and strokes. It's a very common medication.
Right, my grandpa takes one every morning.
Exactly. Now, the standard dose on the bottle might be the perfect life-saving amount for your grandpa, but for you, that exact same dose could cause massive internal bleeding.
Just by following the standard instructions printed on the bottle.
Just by following the instructions. The reason comes down to tiny, microscopic variations in your genetic code.
Okay, explain that. How does my DNA change how a pill works?
Well, inside your liver, you have a specific family of genes that act like a chemical dismantling facility.
At a dismantling facility.
Right. Their entire job is to process foreign substances that enter your body and break them down. And the fascinating thing is that this one specific family of genes is responsible for breaking down over 70% of all the clinical drugs we use today.
Wait, really? 70%.
Yep. Almost everything you take.
So if my specific chemical dismantling facility has a slightly different layout than yours, it changes how my body handles almost any pill I swallow.
That is the core issue. Let's say your genetics make your liver a very slow processor.
Okay, I have a slow factory.
Right. So you take the standard dose of a medication every morning. But because your body breaks it down so slowly, yesterday's pill is actually still in your system when you take today's pill.
Oh, wow. So it just stacks up.
Exactly. Over a week, that standard dose just builds and builds in your bloodstream until it becomes incredibly toxic.
That's terrifying.
And on the flip side, if your genes make you a fast processor, your body destroys the medicine before it ever has a chance to help you.
So you are basically just taking sugar pills at that point.
Right. You're getting no benefit. And the average patient model just ignores all of that. It assumes all our chemical factories run at the exact same speed.
Which is obviously false.
Very false. But the new computer models we are looking at today, they completely dismantle that old assumption.
Because they can see the factory.
Exactly.
Nah.
The technology acts as this ultra-powerful pattern matcher. It can look at your specific genetic blueprint, look at the chemical structure of the drug, and predict exactly how your unique liver will process it.
Before a single pill ever touches your mouth.
Before you even pick up the prescription.
Okay, I have to push back here a little bit. Because biology is not a static blueprint. Like, a house blueprint stays the same forever, but my body changes.
That's a fair point.
Right, like my genes might stay the same, sure, but my stress levels go up and down, my diet changes. I might have an underlying infection I don't even know about yet.
Right, it's messy.
Yeah, so how can a static computer program account for a living, breathing, constantly changing organism if the math is just about matching genes to drugs? Why couldn't humans just figure this out with giant spreadsheets?
Well, the human mind simply cannot process millions of intersecting, changing biological data points all at once. If you just used a static spreadsheet, you're right, it would fail when the real world gets messy.
So how does the artificial intelligence handle the mess?
Because it isn't just looking at a single snapshot of your DNA. The real power lies in tracking a timeline of your health, data over a long period of time.
Oh, so it's updating as I change.
Yes, it isn't just looking at who you are today, it is looking at the entire movie of your health.
That makes a lot more sense.
One of the most remarkable studies in our review looked at how these models analyzed patient health records over several years.
And what did they find?
The system wasn't just looking at genetics, it was looking at routine blood work, minor complaints to the doctor, slight changes in weight, or tiny shifts in inflammation markers over months.
Just tiny little breadcrumbs.
Exactly. And by seeing the trajectory of all those tiny changes together, millions of data points, the technology could spot the warning signs of autoimmune diseases up to 5 years before the patient ever felt a traditional symptom.
Wait, 5 years before you even feel sick?
Up to 5 years, yes.
That is half a decade where you could change your diet or reduce your stress or start preventative treatments rather than just waiting for the disease to set your body on fire.
It changes the entire philosophy of medicine. We are moving from reactive to predictive.
So instead of waiting for the car engine to blow up on the highway, you replace the belt because you know it's going to snap next Tuesday.
That is the perfect way to look at it.
But this leads me to a massive question about the actual mechanics of all this. I want to explain this like we're talking to an 8th grader.
Okay, let's keep it simple.
How does a computer program actually see what is happening inside our cells? Because computers operate on math, just ones and zeros. But humans, we are just squishy, messy bags of water and chemicals. How does the machine translate our squishy biology into something it can actually analyze?
To do that, the technology had to solve one of the most notoriously difficult physical puzzles in the entire natural world.
Which is?
It had to figure out how proteins fold.
Yeah, let's spend some time on this because the word protein carries a lot of baggage for most people.
It really does.
When someone mentions protein, I immediately think of nutrition. I think of a piece of chicken or a scoop of protein powder in a smoothie after the gym.
Yeah, there's a very common perception. We mostly talk about it as food.
Right. I think of it as just a dumb brick that your body uses to build muscle.
But inside a living cell, a protein is not a dumb brick at all. It is a highly complex, active machine. Proteins are the actual workforce of your body.
Okay, so what do these machines actually do?
They do everything. They digest the food in your stomach, they carry the oxygen in your blood, they literally build the structure of your eyes, and they fight off invading viruses.
So if they are the workforce, how does a chain of chemicals turn into a working machine?
Think of it like a piece of paper. When a protein is first created in your body, it is just a long, flat string of chemicals.
Like a flat sheet of notebook paper.
Right. But a flat piece of paper can't do much on its own. The magic happens when that paper folds.
Oh, like an intricate piece of origami.
Exactly like origami. If you take that flat paper and fold it in a very specific, complicated sequence, you can create a crane or a box or a tiny mechanical mechanism.
Right, you give it structure.
In your cells, that long string of chemicals folds in on itself, snapping into a highly specific three-dimensional shape. And the shape it takes determines exactly what job it will do in your body.
So the shape is everything. If the origami folds correctly, I am healthy. The tiny machine does its job.
And if the origami folds incorrectly, the machine jams.
It just stops working.
It either stops working or worse, it starts destroying things around it. Almost every disease we know of, from memory loss to cancer to lung diseases, is ultimately tied to proteins that are folded the wrong way or behaving badly because of their shape.
Which means if we want to cure a disease, we have to interact with those specific origami shapes. We have to either fix them or shut them down completely.
Yes, and to fix or shut down a protein, a drug has to physically attach to it.
Like puzzle pieces.
Right. You can think of the folded protein as a complex biological lock, and the drug is the chemical key.
Okay, I follow that.
If the key fits perfectly into all the little crevices of the lock, you can turn the machine off or on.
Sounds simple enough.
But here is the historical problem. For decades, scientists were trying to design keys without actually being able to see the locks.
Wait, because they couldn't see the shapes the proteins were folding into?
Exactly, they had to guess. They used these incredibly slow, painstaking laboratory methods.
Like what?
Like freezing the proteins into crystals and bouncing light off them just to look at the shadows.
That sounds miserable.
It was. It could take a scientist their entire career, decades, just to figure out the three-dimensional shape of one single protein. It was literally guessing in the dark.
And this is where the computers step in.
Enter the artificial intelligence systems. The newest models from the top tech labs have essentially just turned the lights on in the room.
Wow.
They learn the underlying rules of how those chemical strings attract and repel each other. So now you can just feed the computer the flat string of text representing the chemical chain.
And the computer just knows how it folds.
Within seconds, it predicts the exact three-dimensional origami shape it will fold into.
Wow. Going from a lifetime of laboratory work to a few seconds of computer processing, that alone is a complete revolution.
It is. But knowing the shape of the lock is really only half the battle. You still have to find the key that fits.
Right. Which brings us to a major breakthrough detailed in the sources from a team of university researchers.
Yes, this is fascinating.
They developed a new matching tool. I think they called it the predicting affinity through homology model or the PATH model.
Right, the PATH tool. Its singular purpose is to look at the shape of the biological lock, look at a massive library of millions of chemical keys, and figure out which one is a perfect fit.
But wait, haven't pharmaceutical companies been using computers to sort through chemical libraries for years? What is so special about this specific new matching tool?
Well, the older computer models had a fatal flaw. In the industry, it's known as overfitting. But the researchers described it brilliantly as being trained to please.
Trained to please. I think we need another analogy for this one because this gets into how machines actually learn.
Let's do it. Let's say you build a machine to grade middle school math tests.
Okay.
But to teach the machine how to grade, you only feed it tests from the smartest student in the class. Tests that scored a perfect A+ every time.
So the machine looks at thousands of perfect tests. It never sees a single wrong answer.
Right, so its entire worldview is built purely on perfection.
I see where this is going.
Then, you hand the machine a test from a student who got every single question wrong.
A completely failing grade.
But because machine has never seen a failure, and because it was trained purely to find patterns of success, it looks at the failing test, finds a few stray numbers that look vaguely familiar, and declares, this is an A+.
Oh, wow. It is just wildly, overly optimistic.
Exactly. It just assumes everything is a success because success is the only thing it knows.
So the older drug matching models did exactly this.
They did. Historically, scientists only publish data on successful drug matches.
Right. Nobody gets a magazine cover for a failure.
Exactly. Nobody publishes huge databases of the millions of chemical combinations that totally failed. So the old computer models were fed a strict diet of pure success.
So when scientists ask those older models, hey, does this new chemical fit this disease?
The model would almost always say, yes, absolutely, it's a perfect match, even when it wasn't even close to a match.
It was essentially just swiping right on every single chemical compound.
Exactly like that.
You ask, is this a good match? And the computer acts like a terrible matchmaker, just telling you every single date is going to be perfect, even if the two molecules have absolutely nothing in common.
And that forced scientists to waste years in the real-world lab testing all these perfect matches, only to find out they were terrible.
So how does the new university tool fix that?
The new tool is fundamentally different. It was built with a strict, no-nonsense filter. Instead of looking at past successes, it focuses purely on the geometry.
The physical shapes.
Right. It maps the atoms like a 3D puzzle and asks, does this shape physically fit into that space?
So it strips away all those optimistic assumptions and just looks at the hard physical reality.
It looks at the geometry, and it is brutally honest about whether the key actually turns the lock. And because it stripped away all the unnecessary calculations that the older models used, it operates about 1,000 times faster than previous methods.
Wait, 1,000 times faster?
1,000 times.
So let's play this out to its logical conclusion. If the artificial intelligence can instantly see the shape of the lock, and it has this incredibly fast, brutally honest filter for finding the right key, what happens when we stop searching through libraries of old keys and we just ask the computer to invent a brand new key completely from scratch?
Then we enter the realm of systems that create things from scratch. We are talking about inventing cures at warp speed.
Warp speed.
Rather than sorting through molecules that already exist in nature, the system is generating completely novel molecules, molecules that the universe has literally never seen before.
It is looking at the lock and custom machining a key out of thin air.
Exactly. And the sources outline a staggering case study of this. A medical technology company used one of these systems to design a brand new medication to treat severe tissue scarring.
Okay, tissue scarring.
Now, to understand the magnitude of this, you have to know that normally taking a drug from a basic idea to the point where it is ready to be tested in human beings is an exhausting trial and error nightmare.
How long does it usually take?
On average, it takes about 6 years of constant failure in the laboratory.
6 years just to get to the starting line of human trials.
Right, but the computer did it in 18 months.
18 months. It slashed 4.5 years off the timeline.
It looked at the target protein causing the scarring. It drew the chemical blueprints for a new molecule. It ran thousands of internal simulations to ensure it would be stable in the human body.
All inside the computer.
All inside the computer.
Yeah.
And it finalized a candidate that was ready for clinical trials in a fraction of the traditional time.
Okay, I am going to channel the listener right now because my alarm bells are definitely ringing.
I don't blame you.
Slashing a 6-year timeline down to 18 months sounds great for efficiency, sure, but it sounds terrifying for safety.
It's the first question everyone asks.
Are we just blindly trusting a computer's math and injecting people with computer-generated chemicals? Like, are we skipping the safety steps?
It is the most important fear people have. But the crucial thing to understand is the boundary line of what the technology is actually allowed to do.
Okay, what's the boundary?
The machine is strictly the architect. It only draws the blueprints.
But drawing a blueprint isn't the same as building the house.
Precisely. Once the computer designs the molecule, real human chemists still have to physically build it in a real lab.
Oh, I see.
And once it exists in the real world, it is subject to the exact same rigorous, heavily regulated testing pipeline as any other drug in human history.
So it does not bypass the medical regulators at all?
Not at all. It must pass safety trials in cells, then in animal models, then the initial phase 1 safety trials in healthy human volunteers, and finally the massive phase 2 and 3 trials in sick patients.
So the guardrails are exactly the same?
Yes. What the machine is doing is just eliminating the years of guessing at the very beginning of the process. Instead of scientists spending 5 years testing thousands of dead-end chemicals in petri dishes just to find one that might work.
The system just hands them a highly optimized, near-perfect candidate on day one.
Exactly. It makes the starting point incredibly precise, but the finish line remains guarded by the exact same safety checks.
And some of these computer-generated drugs are already crossing that starting line, right? They're in human trials.
Yes, The very first wave of completely computer-designed medications has already entered real-world human trials.
That's amazing.
It really is. But creating new drugs from scratch isn't the only way to move fast. One of the most fascinating examples in our research involved teaching an old drug new tricks.
Repurposing. Taking something we already know is safe and using it for a completely different disease.
Exactly. During a recent major viral outbreak, researchers turned to an artificial intelligence system to help them find a treatment fast.
Because we didn't have time to wait 6 years.
Right. Now, medical knowledge is expanding so fast that thousands of research papers are published every single day.
Nobody can read all that.
No human being, not even a massive team of the smartest scientists on Earth, could possibly read, remember, and connect all that information.
It is a complete fire hose of data. You just drown trying to drink from it.
But the machine doesn't drown.
It just reads it all.
The researchers unleashed the system on millions of scientific papers. It read all of them, cross-referencing the intricate biology of how the virus replicated with the known effects of thousands of existing drugs.
And what did it find?
Through all that reading, it found a hidden connection. It realized that an existing drug one that was currently sitting on pharmacy shelves to treat arthritis could be highly effective against the respiratory virus.
Wait, an arthritis drug for a respiratory virus? How did it make that leap?
The machine figured out that this specific arthritis drug performed two totally separate functions at the exact same time.
Okay, what was the first?
First, it chemically blocked the exact doorway the virus was using to enter human lung cells.
It just locked the door.
And second, because it was originally designed for arthritis, its main job was to calm down the immune system.
Oh. And in severe viral infections, it's often the immune system overreacting that causes the most damage, right?
Exactly. It's called an immune storm.
So it blocks the door and stops the storm.
The machine found a single key that locked the door against the virus and simultaneously put out the inflammatory fire.
That is brilliant.
And the most beautiful part of this discovery is that because the drug was already approved for arthritis, we already knew the safe dosages. We already knew its side effects.
So we could just skip all those years of preliminary safety testing.
We could move it directly into hospitals to save lives almost immediately.
It is the ultimate shortcut. We are inventing new keys in 18 months, and we are finding hidden uses for the old keys overnight.
It is a totally new era.
But before we start giving these new or repurposed drugs to you, the technology actually allows us to do a dry run first.
Yes, this is my favorite part.
We can test the drugs on a virtual copy of you.
This is the concept of the digital twin. And it is arguably one of the most significant shifts in patient care we've ever seen.
Let's really break down what a digital twin actually is, because it sounds like something straight out of a science fiction movie. Like, when I hear the term, I imagine creating a character in a role-playing video game. You know, you slide the scales to pick their height, their weight, their stamina, and you have a little avatar walking around on screen. How close is that to reality?
Conceptually, it is remarkably close.
Really?
But instead of picking a hair color and a cool outfit, the avatar is built using your exact real-world biological statistics.
Okay.
It is not just a static file folder with your name on it. It is a dynamic, constantly updating mathematical simulation of your specific body.
So what feeds into the simulation to make it actually accurate?
Everything. The foundation is your unique genetic code. On top of that, it layers the entirety of your electronic health records. Every doctor's visit, every diagnosis, every blood test you have ever had.
Wow. Okay. That's a lot of data.
And then it adds real-time data. If you wear a smartwatch, it streams your daily heart rate, your oxygen levels, your sleep cycles, and your activity levels directly into the simulation.
So it is constantly syncing with my physical body. It's a living model.
Yes. And the utility of this is just staggering.
Give me an example.
Let's say you develop high blood pressure. Normally, a doctor prescribes a standard medication. You take it, you feel dizzy and nauseous for a month, you go back to the doctor, and they say, okay, let's try a different one.
Right. It's just trial and error on your actual physical body.
Which is miserable for the patient.
It's the worst.
But with a digital twin, the doctor can run a simulation first. They apply the medication to your avatar and mathematically fast forward time.
So they can see the future, basically.
Right. The simulation might reveal that, based on your liver genetics and your current diet, that specific pill will cause liver toxicity in 2 weeks.
So the doctor just avoids it entirely.
Exactly. They avoid it, they simulate a different drug,
Yeah.
and they find the one that works perfectly for your unique biology.
You never have to suffer the real-world stomachache just to find out it was the wrong choice.
Exactly.
It's like Let's see if this pill cures your digital avatar before we make you swallow it. It sounds incredible, but the engineering required to build that seems frankly impossible.
This is a massive challenge.
How does a computer take a DNA swab, a doctor's messy handwritten note, and a smartwatch beep, and somehow blend all of that completely different stuff into one coherent simulation?
That integration is the result of a massive technological leap. To build a digital twin, the machine had to evolve beyond just processing text. It had to learn to use all the senses at once.
Use all the senses at once. Let's translate that out of computer science speak.
Think about how a human doctor operates. When you walk into an examination room, the doctor doesn't just stare at the text on your chart, right?
Right, they look at you.
They look at your face to see if you are pale or flushed. They listen to your lungs with a stethoscope to hear if there is a crackle. They look at a visual X-ray on the wall while simultaneously asking you how you feel.
The human brain naturally processes text, audio, and visual information all at the same time to form a complete picture.
Right. They're using all their senses in parallel.
Mm.
But early computers were deaf and blind. They could only read the text in a spreadsheet. They were trapped in a single mode of data.
Just numbers on a screen.
But the new systems can process all the senses simultaneously. The machine can read your typed medical history, look at a high-resolution 3D scan of your heart, and listen to an audio recording of your breathing, all at the exact same time.
And it aligns all of that to build the twin.
Yes.
And according to that massive year-in-review study, the one analyzing 50,000 published research papers, the ability to actually see images is the most disruptive part of this right now, isn't it?
Without a doubt, analyzing medical images is currently the absolute biggest frontier of this technology in healthcare.
More than anything else.
By far, analyzing X-rays, MRIs, CT scans, and eye scans absolutely dominates the field right now.
Why is that?
The reason is simple. A computer doesn't get tired. It doesn't suffer from eye strain.
It doesn't need to grab a cup of coffee after staring at a glowing screen in a dark room for 10 hours.
Exactly. And the sources provide a striking example of this in the field of eye doctors.
Okay, what do they do?
A doctor can take a highly detailed 3D image of a patient's retina, the back of the eye. The machine scans the image and spots microscopic, tiny pools of fluid that indicate the very early stages of a blinding disease.
How tiny are we talking?
These pools of fluid are so incredibly small that even the most experienced, highly trained human experts completely miss them.
Wow. So we are at a point where the machine is not just assisting the human. In very specific visual tasks, it is objectively superior.
It sees the invisible. It operates at a level of precision that human biology simply cannot match.
That is wild. But this incredible capability brings us to a massive practical bottleneck, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Having a digital twin and a superpowered image scanner is fantastic in theory, but real-world doctors are drowning.
They are completely overwhelmed.
They are already overwhelmed by the sheer volume of data they have to process every single day. They absolutely do not have the time to sit at a computer terminal and play video games with patient simulations.
Well, no, they don't.
No doctor I know has free time. Most of them spend half their waking hours just doing data entry, typing notes into clunky hospital software.
It's a huge burden.
If you tell them they now have to run simulations on a digital avatar, they might just quit. They need something to do the heavy lifting for them.
Which leads directly into a major theme from the summit reports, the shift toward what they call agentic systems.
Agentic systems?
You can think of it as the transition from a simple tool to a smart butler.
Okay, let's define the difference here. Because most of us interact with AI on our phones, right? Asking it to write an email or summarize an article. How is a smart butler different?
Well, the tools most people use today are reactive. They're essentially a very smart magic 8-ball.
You shake it, you get an answer.
Right. You ask it one specific question, and you get one specific answer. You tell it to translate a paragraph, it translates it, and then it stops. It just goes to sleep and waits for your next explicit command.
It only does exactly what you tell it to do in that exact moment.
But an agentic system, a smart butler, is proactive.
Proactive.
It is given a broad goal, and it can independently take multiple sequential steps to achieve that goal without you holding its hand. Think of the difference between the magic 8-ball and a highly trained executive assistant.
Okay, walk me through what that executive assistant looks like in a real clinic.
Imagine a doctor has a patient coming in with a highly complex multi-year medical history.
A really thick file.
Instead of the doctor spending 30 minutes before the appointment clicking through dozens of old files trying to get up to speed, the smart butler is given a simple goal: prepare the clinic for this patient.
And then it just goes to work.
It goes to work in the background. First, it independently opens the patient's electronic health chart and reads the entire history. Then, it actively searches the internet for the most recent, up-to-date global medical guidelines for the patient's specific conditions.
Wow.
It checks the patient's current medication list against those new guidelines to ensure there are no dangerous drug interactions. It runs a quick simulation on the patient's digital twin to predict how they might respond to a medication change.
All by itself.
All by itself. It drafts a summary note highlighting the key issues, and it types up a proposed treatment plan.
It is doing all the busy work. It takes a 10-step administrative process and reduces it down to one single step for the human doctor.
Right. Just review the proposal and approve or modify it.
That is incredible.
It handles the immense cognitive load of gathering and synthesizing all that data, and the results in the real world are astonishing.
Did the sources have a specific example of this working?
Yes. They detailed a specific implementation at a prominent children's hospital. They were trying to tackle one of the hardest problems in medicine: diagnosing rare genetic disorders in children.
Oh, rare diseases are a total nightmare to diagnose. A standard doctor might see one case in their entire career.
Exactly.
It often takes families years and years of going from specialist to specialist just to find out what is actually wrong with their child.
The medical community calls it the diagnostic odyssey, and it is an incredibly painful journey for families.
I can't even imagine.
This children's hospital wanted to shorten that odyssey, so they built a tool where doctors could just type in the child's symptoms using everyday natural language.
Just plain English.
Right. And then the smart butler took those symptoms and independently cross-referenced them with massive structured medical databases and global genetic library.
It did the heavy lifting of connecting the random symptoms to the obscure genetic literature.
And by guiding the system with structured medical facts, the results were just incredible. Using older traditional methods, the diagnostic accuracy for these rare diseases was hovering around 41%.
Less than half.
Right. But when they deployed the smart butler, the accuracy skyrocketed to 94%.
Wait, 41% up to 94%?
Yes.
That is the difference between a family waiting 5 years in agonizing uncertainty and getting an answer on a Tuesday afternoon.
It is profoundly life-changing.
And it highlights a specific quote from the Medical Summit report that I found incredibly powerful. The leader stated, "Efficiency is a health outcome."
It is a brilliant framing of the issue.
It really is.
We have a bad habit of separating the business of healthcare from the actual practice of medicine. We treat paperwork and charting and insurance approvals as just administrative headaches. We don't see them as health problems.
But they absolutely are health problems. If a brilliant, highly trained doctor is spending 3 hours a day fighting with a clunky software portal or copying and pasting text into a billing system, that is 3 hours they are not spending with a patient.
Right.
The administrative burden is literally stealing care away from sick people.
The consensus across all the summit reports is very clear on this point. The goal of artificial intelligence in the clinic is never to replace the doctor.
No.
The goal is to clear out the endless administrative underbrush. If the smart butler can summarize the chart, draft the clinical notes, and suggest the standard treatments, it frees up the doctor's cognitive bandwidth.
It gives them their time back.
It gives them the time and the mental energy to actually look you in the eye, listen to your fears, understand the context of your life, and hold your hand.
It takes the robotic tasks away from the doctor, so the doctor has the freedom to be human again. It's using machines to restore the human connection in medicine.
Which is the ultimate irony, but it is exactly what the field needs most right now.
Okay. We have covered a lot of ground, and it all sounds incredibly optimistic.
It's very exciting.
We've talked about curing diseases in record time with models that create things from scratch. We've talked about predicting protein origami.
We've covered a lot.
We've explored how digital twins and smart butlers could revolutionize the clinic and give doctors their empathy back. It sounds like a technological utopia. But we have to confront the reality here.
We absolutely must.
Yeah.
Because handing a machine this much power over human life, over diagnoses and drug discovery, comes with massive existential risks.
It's not all sunshine and rainbows.
No, it is crucial to remember that this technology is not magic. It does not have intuition. It is just math.
And math relies entirely on data.
Exactly. And if the data is flawed, the medicine is flawed.
Which brings us to the dark side of this technology. We need to talk about bias, trust, And what happens when the computer gets it horribly wrong?
This was the central focus of the ethical warnings in the summit reports. The absolute biggest danger facing this technology in medicine right now is algorithmic bias.
Algorithmic bias, the idea that a computer program can be prejudiced. Now, a computer doesn't have feelings, it doesn't have hate, it doesn't have personal prejudices, so how does a math equation become biased?
You're right, a computer has no prejudice. But the data we feed it is deeply human. A machine learns about the world strictly by looking at historical data. If that historical data is incomplete, or if it reflects the historical prejudices and inequalities of human society, the machine will learn those inequalities.
It just copies our homework, mistakes and all.
And worse, it will lock them in. It will assume the human bias is a fundamental biological fact.
Do we have a concrete example of how this actually hurts people in the real world?
We have a terrifyingly concrete example that affected thousands of people recently. We talked about it right at the beginning. Pulse oximeters.
Right, the little glowing plastic clips they put on your finger at the doctor's office to measure the oxygen in your blood. Let's really dive into how that failed.
Okay. They work by shining a beam of light through your skin and measuring how much light is absorbed by the blood cells.
Seems simple.
Now, years ago, when the math for these devices was first being engineered and calibrated, the engineers trained them mostly on data collected from people with lighter skin.
Because that was just the data they had easily available to them.
Yes. But the machine only learned one type of skin. Because the training data lacked diversity, the algorithms inside the machines literally did not know how to accurately interpret light passing through darker skin.
It was a massive blind spot.
A huge one. As a result, the machines systematically miscalculated oxygen levels for patients with darker skin.
So, a patient would be struggling to breathe.
But the machine would tell the doctor their oxygen levels are perfectly fine. In reality, their oxygen was dangerously low.
That is horrific. The doctor trusts the machine, and the patient doesn't get the oxygen they desperately need.
It caused severe, dangerous delays in life-saving treatments, particularly during recent global respiratory pandemics for thousands of minority patients.
And the machine wasn't programmed to be malicious.
No, it just didn't have the right data. But the end result was a massive systemic health disparity caused entirely by an algorithm.
And the systems we are building today, the ones designing drugs and diagnosing rare diseases, they could do the exact same thing on a much larger scale if we aren't careful.
They absolutely could. In fact, our sources point out another glaring example regarding electronic health records.
What happened there?
Researchers built a highly sophisticated model designed to predict the risk of heart disease by analyzing millions of past medical records.
Okay, sounds good in theory.
But when they audited the system, they found that the model completely missed 30% of high-risk patients who lived in poorer neighborhoods.
30%. It missed nearly a third of the people who were in actual danger. How does a super smart computer miss that?
It missed them because people from poorer neighborhoods often have a very different relationship with the healthcare system.
How so?
They might not go to the doctor for routine checkups because of the cost. They might rely on emergency rooms instead of primary care physicians. Therefore, their electronic medical records look very different.
They have huge gaps in their data.
Exactly. The machine looked at the sparse data from these patients and incorrectly concluded, well, this person doesn't have many medical notes, therefore they must be perfectly healthy.
It equated a lack of data with a lack of disease. It assumed silence meant health.
Which is a massive blind spot.
That is huge. And this brings up the critical issue of trust in the clinic. If I am a doctor and the computer tells me a patient is perfectly fine, but my human intuition tells me the patient is sick, what am I supposed to do?
It's a really tough position for the doctor.
Especially if the computer cannot explain its reasoning.
You are hitting on what the industry calls the black box problem.
Let me try an analogy to explain the black box because it's so important for people to grasp.
Good.
It's like taking your car to a mechanic because the engine is making a terrible grinding noise. The mechanic takes the car into the back room, does something behind closed doors for an hour, brings the car back out, and the noise is gone.
Okay.
You ask, hey, what was wrong with it? What did you fix? And the mechanic just stares at you blankly and says, don't worry about it. It works now.
That is precisely how a black box system operates. It ingests all the data, it crunches the numbers in ways that are mathematically incomprehensible to a human brain, and it spits out an output.
A diagnosis or a drug recommendation.
Right. But the pathway it took to get to that answer is completely hidden. It cannot explain its logic in a way a human can understand.
Now, I might accept "don't worry about it" from my car mechanic if the car runs fine, but in medicine, doctors take an oath to do no harm.
They carry the ultimate responsibility.
They carry the legal and moral liability for the patient's life. They cannot accept "don't worry about it." They need to know exactly why the computer made a decision before they prescribe a dangerous chemical or authorize a surgery.
A doctor cannot blindly follow a machine if they are the one left holding the scalpel.
Exactly.
This is why a field called explainability is one of the most heavily funded areas of research right now. We don't just need the machine to be right. We need it to show its work in plain English.
Show the math. So, how do we fix all of this? How do we stop the bias from creeping in? And how do we pry open the black box? What do the experts at the medical summits propose as an actual solution?
The top health leaders are insisting on a fundamental paradigm shift in how we build and test this technology. Currently, the incentive structure is completely flawed.
How does it work now?
A tech company builds a model in a completely sterile computer lab. They train it on a perfectly clean, highly curated data set. The model scores 99% accuracy on a test. They publish a press release declaring it a massive success, and they sell it to a hospital.
But a bustling city hospital is not a sterile computer lab.
No, it is not.
It is a messy, chaotic, completely unpredictable environment.
And that is exactly where the models break down. The solution proposed in the summit reports is that the technology must be continuously tested in the messy, real world.
So you can't just drop it in and walk away.
You cannot just launch the software, install it on the hospital servers, and walk away. It requires what they call a learning health ecosystem.
A learning health ecosystem. What does that actually look like in practice?
It means building constant, rigorous feedback loops. You deploy the system, but you heavily monitor its performance on real patients from diverse backgrounds every single day.
Like having a supervisor watch it work.
Right. And if a doctor notices that the model is consistently missing heart disease in poorer neighborhoods or misinterpreting symptoms in women, you immediately pause the system.
You pull the plug temporarily.
You retrain the model with better, more representative data, and you deploy it again. It requires technologists, doctors, regulators, and even the patients themselves working together in a constant loop, rather than tech companies just throwing software over the wall.
It has to be an ongoing partnership, not a one-time software update.
Exactly.
The stakes are simply too high to put the machine on autopilot.
The technology is too powerful, and human biology is simply too precious to leave unchecked.
Let's zoom out for a second and look at the massive picture we've painted today.
It's a lot to take in.
We started this deep dive exploring how medicine has historically been a guessing game, prescribing standard doses for the average human and just hoping for the best.
And we have seen how this new technology is completely shattering that mold.
We've looked at how it predicts the complex origami of protein shapes.
Right.
We've seen how it can invent brand new drugs from scratch in just 18 months and repurpose old drugs to fight new viruses.
We've explored the creation of digital twins to test treatments on a virtual simulation of your body.
And we've seen how smart butlers could act as assistants, curing the administrative disease that steals doctors away from their patients.
And crucially, we face the sober reality that none of this works if the data is biased or if the black box cannot be trusted. It requires a massive commitment to real-world testing.
It is the most profound transition in the history of medical science. We are moving away from reactive medicine, waiting until the machine is completely broken to try and fix it, and moving toward a future of predictive, personalized, and preventative care.
We are finally mapping the muddy waters of human biology.
But as we map those waters, we are also sailing into completely uncharted territory.
Very true.
Which leaves me with a brand new, frankly mind-bending question for you, the listener, to ponder as we wrap up today.
I love this question.
We've talked a lot about the technology, but we haven't talked about the ownership.
And the ownership implications of this are fascinating and entirely unresolved.
Think about this scenario. Let's say you go to the doctor, and a computer analyzes your personal, highly unique DNA.
Okay.
It looks at your specific biological blueprint, and it uses that data to invent a custom, miraculous drug that works perfectly just for you.
Right.
Who actually owns the recipe to that drug?
It is a legal frontier we are just now hitting.
Do you own the recipe because the entire foundation of the drug is based on your physical body and your unique genetic code?
Or does the multi-billion-dollar technology company own the patent because their machine did the complex math and figured out how to fold the origami?
If your biology is the raw material for a patent, where do your human rights end and the corporate algorithms begin?
It is an ethical frontier that is going to completely redefine what it means to be a patient in the 21st century.
It is a question that society will have to answer very, very soon.
Absolutely.
Thanks for coming along on this deep dive with us. Remember to follow us on your favorite podcast platform and see you on the next dive.